Welcome in, everybody. It is a Tuesday, October 9th, 2012 edition of Chris's Corner on Spreaker.com. My name is Chris Sylvester. I will be your host, as always, here on Chris's Corner for the next 30 to 45 minutes. We will be going over this past weekend in the National Football League. We'll be talking about the Major League Baseball playoffs, as well as the comments that Rangers general manager John Daniels made today about Josh Hamilton. We'll also be looking at the latest rankings out of the college football world, as well as a look ahead to this weekend's games for the top 25 members of those AP rankings. And we'll also, at the end of our show, be going over what Phil Jackson had to say about LeBron James and Michael Jordan's legacy when both their careers are all said and done. In addition to that, I will be joined by Travis Neff, a member of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He does some interactive stuff over there on that website. You can go check him out on the stlouispostdispatch.com. He will be giving me his insight on the Major League Baseball playoffs, as well as what Phil Jackson had to say on LeBron James and Michael Jordan's legacy. So let's get it rolling here. In the National Football League, we all saw last night on Monday Night Football that the Texans were able to beat the mighty, struggling New York Jets. But it wasn't all fun and games coming out for Houston, as their star linebacker, former Rookie of the Year defensive player Brian Cushing, is out for the season with a torn left knee ligament. He left the game in the second quarter yesterday. He is their top tackler this season, and according to their coach, one of the bigger emotional leaders on the ball club. Obviously, Houston, one of two unbeaten teams so far after the win last night against New York. Cushing was hurt in the second quarter last night of the win against the Jets on a low block by guard Matt Slauson. Cushing walked off the field on his own but did not return. Coach Gary Kubiak said Tuesday that Cushing has a torn anterior cruciate ligament. It's never good when you can't really pronounce it that well. And will need surgery in 2 to 3 weeks after swelling subsided. Cushing was leading Houston in tackles with 38 before Monday night's game. So obviously this is a huge blow for the Houston Texans, but they still got a lot of talented defensive players. Quentin Demps has been huge for them in the secondary, as well as J.J. Watt knocked down 3 or 4 passes last night. One was intercepted. So is it a loss for Houston? Absolutely, but does it necessarily derail their chances of getting deep into the playoffs? No, because they just have a full-out attack on the offensive side of the ball with Arian Foster, Johnson at wide receiver, and Schaub at quarterback. So certainly still a lot of talent to go around on this Houston Texans team. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle for them on the defensive side of the ball without Cushing, but I'm sure they'll find a guy to put on the defensive line that, will certainly help out and be able to stop the run, something that Houston has been able to do so far this season, as they have just looked absolutely fantastic. They are 5-0, one of only 2 5-0 teams, the other being the Atlanta Falcons. Meanwhile, on the Jets side, of course, the NFL coaches have their weekly press conferences the day after the game. A lot of them had them yesterday, but they played the Monday night game against the Texans yesterday. So Rex Ryan was on the stand today and was asked if Mark Sanchez is still going to remain the New York Jets starting quarterback. And Coach Rex Ryan said it plain and simple. He said, quote, "Yeah, no question," end quote. Sanchez is mired in one of the worst slumps of his career. He has the lowest completion percentage in a team's first 5 games since 2000. 2000. That's a long time. That's 12 years. Mark Sanchez, of course, first 2 years led the Jets to back-to-back AFC Championship games. Hasn't exactly been the same since. Bringing in Tim Tebow didn't exactly help. I really think that the Jets are going to have to move Mark Sanchez to a different team sooner or later. It just seems like ever since Tebow got there, ever since the media started being on the Jets last season, Sanchez has been mired in this slump. He just hasn't been able to make the passes in the tight windows like he did his first 2 seasons in the National Football League. I really just think that Mark Sanchez needs to be moved to a smaller team, and I think he'd do a lot better there. But obviously the Jets are one of the most highly scrutinized teams in the NFL, and I just don't think that this is the place for Mark Sanchez to continue his career. I think he's a fantastic, phenomenal young quarterback, but I think the Jets would be better off with a guy who can play in the big market, and I think Sanchez, for Sanchez's sake, he would be better off playing in a smaller market. I'd really like to see Tim Tebow start at quarterback for the Jets. Obviously, we saw what he could do last year with the Denver Broncos. He led them to a playoff victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers before getting demolished in the second round by the New England Patriots. But nonetheless, I mean, this guy is a winner. Tim Tebow, all he does is win, and that's what the Jets need desperately right now. They are 2-3 on the season, and the next 2 games for them don't get any easier. The Indianapolis Colts are coming off of a win against the Green Bay Packers. Andrew Luck is as good as any young quarterback in the National Football League. And then the next week, of course, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Nothing ever comes easy against the New England Patriots. So it wouldn't surprise me in the next week or 2 to see the Jets give Tim Tebow an opportunity at quarterback, but for right now, they are sticking with Mark Sanchez. So those were the headlines from those 2 teams. How about the New Orleans Saints? They just got their first victory this past weekend against the San Diego Chargers. And some more good news for the Saints, you could say today. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has reduced the bounty-related suspensions of 2 New Orleans Saints players while upholding the punishments of the other 2. Linebacker Scott Fujita's 3-game suspension has been reduced to 1, while defensive end Anthony Hardgrove's 8-game penalty has been trimmed to 7 games. The suspensions of linebackers Jonathan Vilma and defensive end Will Smith will remain the same. Vilma is on the Saints' physically unable to perform list and will not be eligible to play this year, but can keep the money he has been paid for the 6 weeks on the PUP list. The NFL Players Association released a statement addressing Goodell's decisions. Quote, "For more than 6 months, the NFL has ignored the facts, abused the process outlined in our collective bargaining agreement, and failed to produce evidence that the players intended to injure anyone ever," the statement said, end quote. So, you know, we knew coming into the season that it was going to be a hardship for the New Orleans Saints to get deep into the postseason. I don't think anybody saw them starting out 0-4, considering they didn't play the best teams in the world to start off the season. But nonetheless, they did start off 0-4, were able to get a huge victory against the San Diego Chargers. But, you know, you still look at the record, it's glaring you right in the face. 1-4, you have a 5-0 team in Atlanta in your division. Football is a short season. There's 11 games left for both these teams, Atlanta and New Orleans, and it's going to be awfully hard for the Saints not only to just catch the Falcons, but to get a wild card spot. I really don't see the Saints making the postseason this year. You know, Mickey Loomis, their general manager, can't be at any of their games until 8 games in the season, so 3 more to go for him. And then, of course, they're without their coach, Sean Payton, for the rest of the season. Very tough to perform without your coach, especially after the success that he has had with the Saints the last 3 seasons, including 3 seasons ago when he led the Saints to their first and only Super Bowl championship. So certainly, you know, the New Orleans Saints are just a team in disarray right now. Drew Brees is going to be Drew Brees, but the running game's not what it was, and the defense is not what it was without Vilma and Smith. So certainly some turmoil, but you know they deserve it. Can't be placing bets on how hard to knock a guy out in the National Football League. That's a no-no. Roger Goodell got him, and the bounty investigation was able to crack down on the New Orleans Saints. That is all for the NFL, but we will move on to college football. The weekly AP Top 25 rankings came out, and Alabama, for the 6th straight week, was on top, followed by Oregon, South Carolina, Florida, and West Virginia in the top 5. 6th was Kansas State. 7th was Notre Dame after a very impressive victory against the Miami Hurricanes at Soldier Field in Chicago. Ohio State put up over 60 points against Nebraska. LSU coming off their first loss of the season to Florida, who moved to number 4. Oregon State just keeps it rolling. Somehow, Oregon State just really been a big surprise in the Pac-12 so far this season. They're 4-0. They're number 10, ahead of the USC Trojans, who I'm sure still at this time of season, everybody would have thought that this team would be 1 or 2, but of course had that slip up to Stanford in Week 3. Still find themselves at number 11 after a win at Utah. Florida State at number 12. Their national title hopes are probably gone after a loss to North Carolina State. Oklahoma back at 13. Georgia at 14 after a loss to South Carolina. Texas back at 15 after a loss to West Virginia. Clemson, still recovering from that Florida State loss, had a big rebound win against Georgia Tech this past weekend. Stanford had a thrilling overtime victory against Arizona. Louisville stays undefeated at 5-0. Mississippi State 5-0. Rutgers, big surprise out of the Big East, they're 5-0. They're at number 20. Cincinnati, another team out of the Big East, undefeated, 4-0. They're at 21. Texas A&M out of the SEC checks in at number 22 after a win against Ole Miss. Louisiana Tech out of the WAC Conference, Western Athletic Conference, at 23. Another WAC member, Boise State, at 24. And Denard Robinson and Michigan back in the top 25 at number 25. So, the big thing that pops out to you there is that LSU's back at number 9 and Florida's back at number 4. Florida has not been the same since Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow departed, but certainly Jeff Driscoll has done a fantastic job at quarterback over there. Their defense looked absolutely fantastic, defending Zach Mettenberger and the LSU offense this past Saturday. This is a team that could threaten Alabama's chance at winning an SEC title. I still think Alabama's the best team in the nation, but I certainly think Florida has a chance to challenge them when it's all said and done. Another thing that really stands out to me is that you have the last year of the Western Athletic Conference. Of course, after this season, the Western Athletic Conference, better known as the WAC, is disbanding. All those teams are either moving to the Big East or the Mountain West or the Conference USA, or they will move as an independent school from here on out until they can find a conference. Louisiana Tech will be moving to the Conference USA next season. They check in at number 23. Louisiana Tech was a team coming into the season that I said could possibly go undefeated, and they have a huge game against Texas A&M that we'll get to in a second. But really impressive wins this season. They've been averaging 53.2 points per game. That's good enough for 3rd in the FBS. And it's not like they've played a bunch of cupcakes. They had a huge 56-49 win at Houston. They beat Rice pretty badly, 56-37. Went into Illinois, a Big Ten school, and knocked them straight on their back, 52-24. Went to Virginia, won that game, 44-38. Virginia, of course, another school out of the ACC, a BCS school. So they're 2-0 against BCS schools, and then another blowout of a lower division school, UNLV, last week. So we'll get to them and their game against number 22 Texas A&M. That should be a great game coming up this Saturday. Of course, that was a game that was postponed due to Hurricane Isaac in late August. Got rescheduled for this weekend, which was supposed to be both teams' byes, but they are meeting up, and it'll be a heck of a matchup. It's one of the games of the week, in my opinion. And then right behind Louisiana Tech at number 24, another team out of the WAC, Boise State. So Boise State's their only loss was a 4-point loss at number 13 at number 13 Michigan State. Michigan State has moved back since then out of the top 25, but still Michigan State at Michigan State. Definitely a tough place to play. Since then, Boise State's not what it was in the years past with Kellen Moore graduating, but, Jeff Southwick has done the best he can do